Hey, tonight we explore the forgotten art of medieval monasteries, where silence meets creation. In the shadowed corners of ancient scriptoria, where sunlight filters through narrow windows, nuns transform the remnants of yesterday's communion into tomorrow's written word. Their hands, weathered by prayer and labor, craft liquid night from discarded wine. The alchemy of devotion turns what is spent into what endures for centuries. Listen closely to the whisper of quill against vellum, the soft bubbling of reduction pots, the prayers murmured over steaming mixtures. This is where faith becomes tangible, where the divine manifests in the humble task of creating ink from what others discard. If you're enjoying this peaceful moment, please like, share, and subscribe. What time is it where you are? Which city? Are you watching from tonight? Dim your lights, turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and settle in. Let your thoughts wander gently into the past. The morning bell pulls you from slumber, its bronze voice echoing through the stone corridors of St. Hildegard's Abbey. Your eyes open to darkness, the winter morning not yet yielding to dawn. Your breath forms delicate clouds above your narrow bed as you rise, your bare feet meeting the icy floor. The coarse fabric of your novice's habit scratches against your skin as you dress, a constant reminder of your vows of simplicity. You make your way through the silent corridors, joining the procession of hooded figures moving toward the chapel. The smell of damp stone and beeswax candles fills your nostrils, familiar companions to your daily devotions. Your lips move in silent prayer, the words etched into your mind through months of repetition. The cold seeps through your woolen layers, but the discomfort is part of your offering. After Lauds, Sister Agnes finds you with a gentle touch on your shoulder. Her face is a map of deep lines, testament to decades within these walls. Today, you begin new work, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Come with me to the scriptorium. Your heart quickens. After months of kitchen duties and garden work, you have been granted entry to the most hallowed space in the Abbey, where the sisters create manuscripts that will outlast all of you. The scriptorium sits atop the Abbey's tallest tower, closest to heaven, they say. The circular room is lined with windows that capture every precious moment of daylight. When Sister Agnes opens the heavy oak door, the smell washes over you. Parchment, leather, and something sharper, more complex. 10 sisters sit at angled desks, their heads bent in concentration, fingers stained with colors that speak of secret knowledge. Sister Agnes leads you not to the writing desks, but to a small adjoining chamber. The air here is thicker, filled with smells both familiar and strange. A small furnace glows in the corner, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Wooden shelves hold dozens of clay pots, glass phials, and bundles of dried plants. From hooks in the ceiling hang small linen bags, their contents releasing faint aromas into the air. Here we make what gives voice to our devotions, Sister Agnes says, gesturing to the room. Ink, pigment, the blood of our manuscripts. She moves to a table where several dark bottles sit, their contents concealed. And today, you will learn the first step in transforming what has been used into what will endure for centuries. She gestures to the bottles. Wine from last month's communion. Too sour for the chalice now, but perfect for our purposes. She uncorks one, and the sharp scent of vinegar fills the air. Nothing in God's creation is without purpose, child. Even what seems spent can be transformed through faithful hands. You watch as she pours the dark liquid into a copper pot. The calm, rusty color catches the light from the small window, revealing hints of purple within its depths. Wine that has turned to vinegar makes the strongest ink, she explains, her gnarled fingers working with surprising grace. The longer it sours, the darker our words will become. You spend the morning learning to prepare the base for the ink. Sister Agnes shows you how to measure wine vinegar into the copper pot, adding rainwater collected during spring storms. Water believed to be more pure than that drawn from the well. The mixture bubbles gently over the furnace's heat, filling the small room with sharp, tangy vapor that makes your eyes water. Breathe it in, Sister Agnes instructs. Know the scent of each stage. Your nose will guide you when your eyes cannot. You inhale deeply, letting the acidic aroma fill your lungs. Your mind catalogues the sensations, the sting in your nostrils, the subtle fruit notes beneath the vinegar's sharpness, the faint mineral quality that speaks of the earth where the grapes once grew. As the mixture reduces, Sister Agnes reaches for a small clay pot on a high shelf. Inside are small, hard lumps that resemble dark stones. Oak galls, she explains, placing 3 into your palm. They are lighter than they appear, porous to the touch. The tree's response to the wasp's invasion becomes our most precious ingredient. See how God provides solutions within problems. Turn the galls over in your hand, feeling their irregular surfaces. These strange growths, formed when wasps lay eggs in oak leaves, contain the tannic acid that will transform the wine into something permanent. The paradox is not lost on you, how invasion and disease create the very substance that will allow sacred words to endure. Sister Agnes shows you how to crush the galls with a mortar and pestle, explaining that some scriptoria purchase them already, powdered, but St. Hildegard's has always prepared them fresh. This way, we know their strength, she says, and the work of our hands becomes part of our prayer. The crushing is harder than it appears, requiring steady pressure and patience. Your arm aches with the effort, but you persist, finding rhythm in the circular motion. The powder released is surprisingly fine, a dusty brown that catches in your throat if you breathe too deeply. Sister Agnes nods with approval as you work. Good. Now we add them to the reduction. She guides your hand as you sprinkle the powder into the simmering liquid, showing you how to stir it with a wooden rod carved from rowan wood. Never meddle at this stage, she cautions. It would turn the mixture too dark too quickly. The powder dissolves slowly, darkening the reddish liquid to a deep brown. The smell changes too, becoming earthier, more complex. You stir until your wrist aches, watching as the mixture thickens slightly. Through the small window, you can see the sun has risen higher, its light creating patterns on the stone floor as it filters through the branches of the ancient yew tree outside. While the mixture simmers, Sister Agnes shows you the next ingredient, small chips of iron that look like rust. These come from the blacksmith's shop, she explains. The filings and scraps from his work become our treasure. She demonstrates how to wrap the iron pieces in linen, creating a small bundle that she suspends in the liquid using a length of string tied to a wooden rod that spans the pot's diameter. Now we wait, she says, wiping her hands on her apron. The iron must surrender itself slowly to the liquid. Too quick, and the ink becomes unstable. Too slow, and it lacks depth. She gestures to several other pots simmering on the far side of the furnace. Those began yesterday and the day before. Each day, we continue the cycle. You use the waiting time to clean the mortar and pestle, learning from Sister Agnes the importance of keeping tools immaculate. Contamination brings failure, she says, firmly, and failure wastes what God has provided. There is no room for carelessness in this work. By midday, the mixture has transformed, growing darker and more opaque. Sister Agnes shows you how to test its progress by placing a drop on a scrap of parchment. The liquid blooms into a grey-black mark, feathering slightly at the edges. Not ready, she says, but coming along well. As the bell rings for sext, you both pause for prayer, bowing your heads while still tending the simmering pots. You find comfort in this seamless blend of work and devotion, how the making of ink becomes an extension of worship. When prayers conclude, Sister Agnes permits you a brief meal of bread and cheese, eaten while standing beside the furnace. In the afternoon, she introduces you to the final ingredient, gum arabic, tears of hardened sap collected from acacia trees in distant lands. This gives the ink its permanence, she explains, showing you the translucent amber lumps. Without it, our words would wash away with time or flake from the page. She demonstrates how to crush it into fine powder, then dissolve it in a separate, small pot of warmed rainwater. This is why our ink endures when others fade, she says with quiet pride. Many scribes use less gum to save on cost or substitute local tree saps, but we follow the old ways. Our books must last until God's kingdom comes. The gum solution is sticky and has a faintly sweet smell. When properly dissolved, Sister Agnes shows you how to strain it through fine linen, removing any impurities. Before it joins the main mixture, your fingers grow tacky with the residue, and she teaches you to clean them with a paste of ashes and oil rather than plain water, which would only spread the stickiness. As the day wanes and the light grows golden through the windows, Sister Agnes deems the mixture ready for its next stage. She shows you how to carefully remove the iron bundle, now significantly smaller than before. The liquid has become a deep, black brown, with a sheen on its surface that catches the light like a raven's wing. Now we add the gum, she says, guiding your hand as you pour the sticky solution into the main pot. The mixture must be stirred continuously as the gum incorporates, and you take turns with the wooden rod, maintaining the steady clockwise motion that Sister Agnes insists upon. Always follow the sun's path, she reminds you, as God intended movement to flow. When the mixture is fully combined, she shows you how to strain it through layers of increasingly fine cloth, a slow process that requires patience and a steady hand. The liquid that emerges is glossy and black as night, catching hints of deep purple when light strikes it at certain angles. We are not finished, Sister Agnes says, but we have completed today's work. Now it must rest. She guides you in pouring the precious liquid into clay pots with tight-fitting lids. Tomorrow we will test it, adjust it, and prepare it for the scribes. But tonight it undergoes its own transformation, as all things do in darkness. As you clean the implements and bank the furnace for the night, Sister Agnes watches your movements with careful eyes. You have good hands, she says finally, steady and patient. Perhaps God has called you to this work. The rare praise warms you more than the furnace ever could. Before leaving the scriptorium, she takes you to see the manuscripts in progress. In the main room, the sisters are cleaning their quills and covering their work for the day. One beckons you closer to see the page she has been illuminating. A scene of Christ's baptism rendered in colours so vibrant they seem to glow from within. The black ink outlines every figure with perfect precision, each line as fine as a hair, yet unfailingly smooth. This ink was made last winter, the sister tells you. From wine left from the bishop's visit, see how it holds the light. That is what we strive for. Ink that does not merely sit upon the page, but becomes one with it. As you descend the tower steps for Vespers, your hands bear the evidence of your day's work, stains that no amount of scrubbing will remove. Sister Agnes notices you examining them in the fading light. Wear them proudly, she says. They are the marks of creation. Tomorrow, they will be darker still. That night, as you lie on your hard pallet, listening to the breathing of the other novices, you raise your stained fingers to your face. They smell of oak and iron, of wine transformed, and ancient knowledge. You fall asleep with the scent filling your dreams, your mind already anticipating tomorrow's lessons. Dawn finds you eager to return to the ink room. Sister Agnes is already there, examining the pots you prepared yesterday. It has settled well, she pronounces, showing you the clear liquid that has separated at the top. With careful hands, she demonstrates how to decant this excess without disturbing the precious ink below. Now we test, she says, taking up a freshly cut quill. She dips it into the ink and draws a series of lines on a scrap of parchment. You watch, fascinated, as the black lines glisten momentarily before sinking into the surface. She sprinkles fine sand over the marks, waits a moment, then tips the parchment to remove the excess. The lines remain crisp and dark. Good body, she murmurs, more to herself than to you. But it could flow more smoothly. She shows you how to add a few drops of wine, not vinegar this time, but sweet wine reserved for this purpose, to adjust the ink's consistency. Ink is alive, she explains. It must be coaxed, not forced, to reveal its best character. Throughout the day, you learn how different manuscripts require different formulations. Psalters with their larger text need ink with more body. Books of hours, with their delicate script, require ink that flows more freely from the quill. Gradually, you come to understand that making ink is not merely following a recipe, but responding to a living substance, adapting to its quirks and character. As the week progresses, you learn more secrets. How a drop of honey can prevent the ink from becoming too brittle in winter. How ink made from communion wine is reserved for copying the Gospels, while ink from the refectory's everyday wine is used for commentaries and lesser texts. How some sisters insist that ink made during Advent lasts longer than that made during ordinary time, though Sister Agnes dismisses this as superstition. You learn to recognize the subtle differences in oak galls gathered from different trees. How those from the ancient oak by the north wall produce a deeper black, while those from the younger trees near the stream give a hint of blue to the finished ink. You discover that rainwater collected during thunderstorms makes ink that flows more smoothly than that made with gentle spring rain. By the end of the month, you have stained not just your hands, but your soul with this ancient craft. The rhythms of ink making have become as familiar as the rhythms of prayer. You find yourself noticing the potential for pigment in everything. The rusty water from the old well that could strengthen blacks, the blackberries in late summer that might yield purple, the walnut husks in autumn that promise rich brown. One evening, as you work together in the fading light, Sister Agnes reveals the true purpose of your training. The Abbey has received a commission, she says quietly. A psalter for the new cathedral in Canterbury. The finest materials will be used. Vellum from unborn calves, gold leaf from Byzantium, lapis lazuli from lands beyond the Holy Land. She pauses, looking at you intently. And ink made by your hands, child. I am old, and my eyes fail me. But you, you have the gift. You will make the ink for this great work. The responsibility settles on your shoulders, heavy but welcome. You think of all the hands that will touch this book in centuries to come, all the eyes that will read words rendered in ink you have created. Through your humble work with discarded wine and twisted oak growths, you will help God's word endure long after your mortal body has returned to dust. That night, you dream of a vast library where books made with your ink stand against the ravages of time. In your dream, you see generations yet unborn opening these volumes, their fingers tracing words that remain as clear and dark as the day they were written. You wake with tears on your cheeks, overwhelmed by this glimpse of your small part in God's eternal plan. The next morning, you begin gathering the materials for the Canterbury Psalter's ink. Sister Agnes has secured wine of exceptional quality, the remains of what was served at Easter Mass, now turned to perfect vinegar. The abbess herself brings oak galls collected from a tree said to have been planted by St. Augustine. Remember, Sister Agnes tells you as you begin the familiar process. Once more, we do not merely make ink, we make vessels for God's truth to sail through time. As you stir the simmering mixture, watching darkness bloom from the cast-off remnants of celebration, you feel a profound sense of connection to the sisters working silently around you, to those who taught them in generations past, and to those who will learn these secrets in centuries to come. In this ancient craft of transformation, you have found your place in a chain of faithful hands that stretches across time, preserving light against darkness through the humble alchemy of wine become ink. As the last whispers of the scriptorium fade into memory, the mist of time shifts, carrying you across mountains and years to another place where devoted hands perform their quiet alchemy. You pull your woolen cloak tighter as winter's breath seeps through the stone walls of Barking Abbey. Outside, snow piles against the windows, turning the world a ghostly white and muting all sound except the persistent howl of wind across the marshlands. This February of 1410 has brought the harshest winter in memory, freezing the Thames solid and isolating the Abbey from London's supply wagons for weeks now. In the scriptorium, your fingers have grown stiff despite the small brazier that glows in the centre of the room. 6 other sisters work alongside you, their faces illuminated by the weak winter light, filtered through oiled parchment that covers the window openings. Glass is too precious for all but the chapel windows here. Your current task, copying a collection of healing texts for the infirmary, has slowed as supplies dwindle. Sister Matilda. The voice belongs to Sister Catherine, the Abbey's precentrix, responsible for all books and writing materials. Her tall figure appears in the doorway, frost clinging to her black habit from the short journey across the cloister. A moment, if you please. You set down your quill carefully, marking your place in the text with a thin strip of vellum, and follow her into the small antechamber where writing supplies are stored. The shelves, normally filled with pots of ink, bundles of quills, and rolls of parchment, show alarming gaps. Sister Catherine gestures to the ink pots, where only 3 remain, their contents barely covering the bottoms. "We are nearly out," she says, her voice low with concern. "No merchants will brave the roads until the thaw, which could be weeks away. The abbess asks if you remember the old method, the one your grandmother taught you before you took your vows." Warmth floods through you at the mention of your grandmother, a wise woman known throughout your village for her knowledge of herbs and medicines, and for her skill in making writing ink from household materials when the monastery's supply ran low You were just 12 when she showed you how to transform leftover wine into something that could preserve words for centuries. I do, you reply, memories surfacing of your grandmother's gnarled hands guiding yours, showing you how to judge consistency by feel rather than sight, as her eyes had grown clouded with age. But I will need certain materials. Sister Catherine's tense shoulders relax slightly. Tell me what you require, and I will see what can be found. You list the necessities: soured wine or vinegar, oak galls if available, iron scraps, gum arabic. Sister Catherine nods, making mental notes. The cellarer mentioned several casks of wine that turned during the autumn, too sour for the table or even cooking, but she keeps them for making vinegar. Would that serve? Perfectly, you answer. The more sour, the better for our purpose. By midday, a small procession arrives at the scriptorium. The cellarer herself, Sister Agnes, bearing a small cask. The abbey blacksmith's assistant with a leather pouch of iron filings and rusty nails. And a novice carrying a basket of withered oak galls collected from beneath the great oak in the abbey cemetery. The ground beneath it recently exposed as the snow melted from around its massive trunk. Sister Catherine has cleared a corner of the scriptorium for your work, setting up a small table near the brazier and providing a copper pot that has seen better days. As the other sisters continue their copying, stealing curious glances at your preparations, you roll up your sleeves and don a heavy apron. I remember doing this with my father, Sister Agnes says, as she helps you decant the sour wine into the copper pot. The liquid pours thick and syrupy, its colour a deep ruby that appears almost black in the dim light. The sharp smell reminds you of summer evenings, of vineyards and harvest songs. He was steward to the Baron of Essex and made ink when supplies ran low during the wars with France. You smile, recognizing a kindred history. My grandmother said ink making was women's work in ancient times, before the monasteries claimed it. She learned from her mother, who learned from hers. A line of knowledge stretching back to when Barking was still a double monastery, with both brothers and sisters. Sister Agnes makes the sign of the cross. God provides knowledge as needed through the generations, she says, then returns to her duties, leaving you to your work. You position the pot over the brazier, adding rainwater collected from the barrel outside the kitchen. The mixture must reduce slowly, and you settle into a rhythm of gentle stirring, watching as steam rises, carrying the acidic scent throughout the room. Some of the younger sisters wrinkle their noses at the smell, but the older ones breathe deeply, recognizing the promising aroma of creation. While the liquid reduces, you examine the oak galls the novice has brought. They are smaller than ideal, gathered after lying under snow for months rather than freshly fallen, but their weight feels right in your palm. Using a pestle and mortar borrowed from the infirmary, you begin crushing them to powder, the familiar motion awakening muscle memories from childhood. What makes the ink black? Asks a young novice who has abandoned her sweeping to watch you work. The wine is red, the oak galls brown, yet they become darkness itself. You continue grinding as you answer, your voice falling into the teaching, cadence you use with novices during scripture readings. It is a kind of magic God has built into his creation. When the tannin in the oak galls meets the iron, they embrace each other and transform, like how our souls, touched by God's grace, become something new and lasting. The novice's eyes widen. Is it not sin to speak of magic? An older sister chuckles from her writing desk. She means alchemy, child. The natural transformations God designed into his world. Not the devil's work, but the Lord's. You nod, adding, the same principles that turn grape juice to wine also help us make ink. Transformation, is God's signature written across creation. When the liquid has reduced by half, you add the crushed oak galls, watching as the powder dissolves into the simmering mixture, gradually darkening it from ruby to deep brown. The smell changes too, becoming earthy and complex. Next come the iron filings and rusty nails, which you wrap in a small square of linen before suspending in the pot. Throughout the afternoon you tend the mixture, stirring occasionally, checking the color against the light. Outside, the snow begins again, large flakes drifting past the windows like feathers from angel wings. The scriptorium grows quieter as sisters complete their day's work, clean their quills, and depart for vespers. Sister Catherine remains, watching your work with interest. When you explain that the mixture must simmer until evening, she arranges for a novice to bring you bread and cheese, so you need not abandon your post. As darkness falls and candles are lit, casting long shadows across the stone floor, the mixture continues its transformation. The final ingredient concerns me most. You admit to Sister Catherine as you check the ink's progress. Gum Arabic comes from far lands and is precious. My grandmother sometimes substituted cherry tree gum, but I see no such trees in the abbey grounds. Sister Catherine's eyes sparkle in the candlelight. When you requested it this morning, I remembered something. She disappears into her private chamber adjoining the scriptorium, returning with a small ceramic jar sealed with wax. 3 years ago, when the bishop visited and brought gifts, there was this. I saved it, thinking it too fine for everyday use. She breaks the seal to reveal gum Arabic of exceptional quality, clear amber pieces that catch the light like tiny gems. Perhaps God guided me to preserve it for just this moment of need. You accept the gift with reverence, knowing its value. After dissolving a measured amount in warm water and straining it through clean linen, you add it to the ink mixture, which has now become a deep, lustrous black. The final steps require patience, more stirring, careful straining, testing the ink on scraps of parchment to judge its flow and opacity. By the time the Compline bell rings, signaling the day's final prayers, you have produced 3 pots of ink as rich and black as a moonless night. Sister Catherine tests one with a quill, drawing a line of text from the psalm appointed for the day. The Lord is my light and my salvation. The words gleam briefly before settling into the parchment, perfect in their clarity. You have given us light in our darkness, she says, genuine gratitude in her voice. This will see us through until the road's clear. The following morning, after Lauds, the abbess herself comes to the scriptorium to see your creation. White-haired and straight-backed despite her 70 years, Mother Joan examines the ink with an expert eye. In her youth, before taking vows, she had been known for her skill in manuscript illumination. This surpasses what we usually receive from London merchants, she pronounces, drawing an intricate initial B on a piece of parchment. The ink flows smoothly, neither too thick nor too thin, clinging to the quill just long enough to transfer perfectly to the surface. How much can you make before our regular supply resumes? And so begins your new duty. Each morning after prayers, you spend 3 hours preparing ink, teaching 2 novices the process so the knowledge will not be lost again within the abbey's walls. The cellarer discovers 9 more casks of spoiled wine in the deepest corner of the cellar, forgotten during the autumn inventory. Enough to keep you in ink until Michaelmas, she jokes. Word spreads beyond Barking's walls. When the thaw finally comes in late March and travel resumes, the nearby monastery of Stratford sends a brother to inquire about your methods. Their own ink supply has suffered from poor quality, fading after just a few years, and they seek to improve their craft. The abbess, recognizing an opportunity, negotiates an exchange. Your knowledge of ink making for access to their extensive library of medical texts, which Barking has long wished to copy. You spend 3 days teaching Brother Thomas the technique, noticing how he meticulously records each step, each proportion, his respect for women's knowledge, overcoming any pride he might have brought to the exchange. Our scriptorium has always purchased ink, he admits on the final day. This method will save precious resources and improve our manuscript's longevity. Your grandmother's wisdom will now preserve God's word in our house as well as yours. As spring advances and the abbey, gardens awaken with new growth. Your experimental nature leads you to refinements in the process. You discover that different vintages of wine produce subtly different inks. Older wines create deeper blacks, while younger ones impart a hint of blue that works beautifully for certain manuscripts. You begin to collect rainwater specifically during thunderstorms, storing it in sealed clay jars after noticing that ink made with such water has a particular vibrancy. The sisters joke that it captures lightning's essence, but you observe a real difference in the finished product. By summer, when merchants' carts once again deliver supplies regularly to the abbey, Sister Catherine makes a surprising announcement. "We will continue making our own ink," she declares during chapter meeting. "The quality surpasses what we can purchase, and the cost is significantly less." Mother Abbess has allocated a small room adjacent to the scriptorium for this purpose. The Phi ink room becomes your domain, a place of transformation and quiet alchemy. Shelves hold labeled jars of different ingredients. Bundles of herbs hang from the rafters, some for ink, others for pigments. A table beneath the window holds mortars of varying sizes, sieves of different grades, and pots arranged by age and material. The novices call it Sister Matilda's Brewery, a name that makes you smile despite its impropriety. In this room, time flows differently. Hours pass in the rhythm of grinding, stirring, straining. The physical work becomes a form of prayer, each motion an echoing of ancient knowledge. You think often of your grandmother, how her weathered hands guided yours, how she connected you to a lineage of women who preserved knowledge through the darkest times. Oak galls are nature's response to invasion, you explain to the novices learning the craft. The wasp lays its eggs, and the oak creates these protective spheres around them. What begins as an injury becomes the source of something lasting and valuable. There is wisdom in that, beyond the making of ink. As autumn approaches and the abbey vineyards prepare for harvest, you begin experimenting with fresh grape juice, reduced and combined with ash to create a purple ink for special manuscripts. When the abbess sees your results, she commissions you to prepare special materials for a book of hours being created as a gift for the king's daughter. Your ink has brought new prestige to our scriptorium, Mother Joan tells you one evening as she inspects your latest creation, a deep blue-black made from the lees of the abbey's finest wine, strengthened with iron from a meteorite that a pilgrim had carried from Santiago de Compostela. We have received 3 new commissions for psalters, and the Bishop of London has requested that we produce a ceremonial copy of St. Bede's history. You think of how chance, or providence, brought this knowledge back to the abbey, how a harsh winter and dwindling supplies forced the resurrection of old wisdom, how your grandmother's voice still guides your hands as you perform these ancient transformations. From lowly things come greatness, Mother Joan continues, quoting St. Augustine. From sour wine comes the medium that will carry God's word to generations yet unborn. That night, as you wash the day's stains from your hands, stains that never quite disappear, marking you as surely as the ring on your finger marks you as Christ's bride. You feel a deep contentment. Through this humble craft, you have found another way to serve, another form of devotion that extends beyond daily prayers and dutiful copying. In the quiet darkness, you whisper thanks to your grandmother, her mother, and all the women who passed. This knowledge from hand to hand across the centuries, in transforming discarded wine into enduring ink, you have become part of something that transcends your mortal span, a living thread in the tapestry of preservation, ensuring that light continues to shine through darkness, that words continue to speak long after their writers have returned to dust. As winter approaches once more, the Abbey cellarer sets aside particular casks for your use. Wine too rough for the table, but perfect for transformation. The cycle continues, waste becoming purpose, endings becoming beginnings, forgotten things remembered and honored through faithful hands, practicing ancient arts in quiet rooms where time moves to the rhythm of stirring rods and softly murmured prayers. The echoes of Barking Abbey fade as time's veil shifts once more, drawing you deeper into history's embrace, to a place where ancient tradition meets necessity in the quiet corridors of faith. Dawn breaks reluctantly over the hills of Tuscany, the February sun struggling to pierce low-hanging clouds heavy with the promise of snow. You stand at the window of your small cell in the Abbey of San Michele degli Angeli, watching your breath form delicate patterns against the glass. The year is 1348, and whispers of a terrible pestilence moving northward from Sicily have reached even this remote community of sisters. A soft knock at your door announces the arrival of Sister Lucia, her usually rosy face drawn with concern. Mother Abbess requires your presence in her chambers, she says, eyes lowered. Immediately, Sister Elisabetta. You follow her through the cold stone corridors, your woolen habit providing little warmth against the unusual chill that has gripped central Italy these past weeks. The Abbey is quieter than usual for this hour. Normally, the morning routines would fill these passages with purposeful movement, but fear has settled over the community like frost, stilling voices and slowing steps. Abbess Beatrice awaits in her private study, a room lined with manuscripts collected over her 40 years of service to God. Though nearing 70, her back remains straight, her eyes clear and penetrating beneath silver brows. The room smells of beeswax candles and dried rosemary, which she burns to clear the air and sharpen the mind. Sister Elisabetta, she says, gesturing for you to sit on the wooden stool across from her desk. What I share with you must remain between us for now. I would not cause undue fear among the sisters. You nod, hands folded in your lap, waiting. The abbess has been your mentor since you arrived at 15, recognizing in you an uncommon intelligence and steady hands perfect for delicate work in the scriptorium. A messenger arrived before matins, she continues, her voice low. The pestilence has reached Florence. The bishop estimates 1/5 of the city has already succumbed, with more falling ill each day. He advises us to close our gates to all visitors and pray for God's protection. The news settles like a stone in your stomach. Florence is but a day's journey on horseback. And our supplies, Mother? Sufficient for many weeks, thank the Lord. But there is another matter. She rises and moves to a small iron chest in the corner, unlocking it with a key worn around her neck. From inside, she withdraws a leather-bound manuscript, its cover worn smooth by generations of hands. This is the Liber Medicinalium, the Book of Healings, compiled by Abbess Sophia when our order was founded 3 centuries ago. She places it on the desk between you with reverence. It contains knowledge gathered from Rome, Byzantium, and even from Arab physicians. Remedies for fevers, poultices for wounds, treatments for afflictions of every kind. You've heard of the book, but never seen it. Its existence is something of a legend among the novices, who whisper that it contains secrets preserved from ancient times. Knowledge that the Church sometimes views with suspicion for its non-Christian origins. We must copy it, the abbess states simply. Not one copy, but many, to be distributed to our sister abbeys throughout Tuscany and beyond. If the pestilence is as devastating as reports suggest, we cannot risk this knowledge being lost with the death of a single community. You understand immediately the enormity of the task. The book is thick, written in a tight script on both sides of each page. Even with all 10 scribes in the scriptorium working solely on this project, it would take weeks to produce multiple copies. There is another difficulty, the abbess continues, as if reading your thoughts. Our supply of ink is limited. The merchant from Siena who brings us materials twice yearly was due next month. But now, her hands spread in a gesture of uncertainty. We must make our own, you conclude, mind already calculating what would be needed. The abbess smiles faintly. Yes, and that is why I have called for you specifically. Before taking vows, you were apprenticed to your father, were you not? A maker of inks and pigments for the Guild of Painters in Pisa. You nod. Surprised she remembers this detail from your life before. For 3 years, mother, until the fever took him and my mother in the same week. Then the knowledge lives in your hands. Can you make ink sufficient for our needs, using what materials we have within our walls? You think carefully before answering. The traditional recipe requires oak galls, iron sulfate, and gum arabic. The first might be found in the woods surrounding the abbey, but the latter two would be difficult to obtain without access to merchants. There is a way, you say slowly, memories surfacing of your father's workshop during a time when trade routes were disrupted by conflicts between Pisa and Genoa. My father taught me how to make ink from wine when other supplies were scarce. Old wine turned to vinegar, combined with iron from nails or tools, and resin from certain trees in place of gum arabic. The abbess's eyes brighten. Our cellar has several casks of wine too sour for the table or even for cooking, kept only because Sister Teresa, may she rest in peace, could never bear to throw anything away that might find use. It would serve perfectly, you confirm. The more sour, the better the ink will be. Then go with my blessing. Take whatever you need from the kitchens, the cellars, the workshops. Sister Agatha will assist you. She has a keen eye and steady hand. You bow your head, accepting the responsibility. As you rise to leave, the abbess adds softly, "We race against death itself, Sister Elisabetta. May God guide your hands." The day passes in a flurry of activity. You and Sister Agatha, a quiet novice with unexpected strength in her slight frame, make multiple trips to the cellar, selecting the sourest wines and transporting them to the small courtyard behind the kitchen, where you can work away from curious eyes. The kitchen sisters provide a large copper pot, eyebrows raised at the request, but asking no questions when told it comes with the abbess's authority. The abbey's elderly blacksmith, Brother Paolo, one of the few men permitted within these walls, due to his advanced age and essential skills, provides rusted iron nails, ancient horseshoes, and filings from his workshop. His rheumy eyes show curiosity, but he too asks nothing, simply crossing himself when you thank him. By midday, your improvised workshop is established. You pour the first cask of wine vinegar into the copper pot, its sharp scent rising in the cold air. Sister Agatha watches intently as you explain the process. Wine that has soured contains acid that will draw out the iron, you tell her, measuring the liquid carefully. The iron gives darkness, permanence. Without it, the words would fade within a season. You set the pot over a small fire, adjusting the flames to ensure the mixture will reduce slowly rather than boil. While it heats, you send Sister Agatha to the woods beyond the abbey walls to search for oak galls, those strange, round growths found on oak trees where wasps have laid their eggs. Look beneath the oldest trees, you instruct. The galls from last autumn will have fallen to the ground. They resemble small wooden apples, though harder and lighter in weight. While she is gone, you continue the preparation, stirring the wine vinegar as it slowly reduces, watching its color intensify from pale amber to deep ruby. The smell reminds you of your father's workshop, the familiar tang of creation, of transformation. Your eyes sting, not entirely from the vapors rising from the pot. Sister Agatha returns successful, her apron gathered into a makeshift basket holding dozens of oak galls. The southern slope has many old oak trees, she reports. I found these beneath the largest one, half buried in leaves. You examine her find with approval. Though dried by winter, the galls are perfect, large and unperforated, meaning the wasp larvae had not emerged before the galls fell. These contain the highest concentration of tannic acid, essential for the blackest ink. Together, you crack the galls open and grind them to powder using mortars and pestles borrowed from the infirmary. The work is harder than it appears, requiring steady pressure and patience. Sister Agatha's young arms prove stronger than yours, and she takes over the grinding while you continue monitoring the reduction of the wine vinegar. My father used to say that making ink is like making wine itself, you tell her as you work side by side. Both require transformation, patience, and faith that what begins as one thing will become another, better thing through time and careful attention. By late afternoon, the wine vinegar has reduced by half, becoming a thick, intensely colored liquid. You add the powdered oak galls, stirring carefully as the mixture darkens further. Next come the iron pieces, nails, horseshoe fragments, and filings, wrapped in a square of linen and suspended in the liquid like a strange tea bag. Now we wait, you explain to Sister Agatha. The iron must surrender itself slowly to the mixture, too quickly, and the ink becomes unstable. Too slowly, and it lacks depth. As the short winter day fades to dusk, you maintain the fire at a steady temperature. The Angelus bell rings, calling the community to prayer, but the abbess has granted you both dispensation to continue your work. You pray where you stand, hands stilling momentarily as words of devotion pass your lips, then resume the careful stirring. The final ingredient presents the greatest challenge, gum arabic, which gives ink its flowing quality and helps it adhere to parchment, comes from distant lands and is typically purchased from specialized merchants. Your father had shown you alternatives, certain tree resins that could substitute. In times of scarcity, cherry trees, you murmur, remembering, or plum, the resin that seeps from their bark can serve our purpose. Sister Agatha's eyes widen. The orchard! The old cherry trees behind the novices' dormitory often weep resin in spring. I've noticed it on my hands after gathering blossoms. With torches, to light your way, you both hurry to the orchard. The night is clear and bitterly cold, stars pricking the black sky like distant candles. Sister Agatha leads you to the oldest trees, gnarled patriarchs whose branches have provided fruit for generations of sisters. By torchlight, you examine the trunks, finding exactly what you hoped for, amber tears of resin frozen in the cold, clinging to the bark like crystallized honey. Carefully, you collect these precious drops, scraping them gently into a small pottery bowl. Back at your workstation, you grind the resin and dissolve it in a small amount of warmed wine, creating a sticky solution that you strain through clean linen before adding to the main mixture. The smell changes, becoming richer, more complex. No longer just sour wine, but something transformed and purposeful. Night deepens around you as you continue to tend the mixture, stirring, testing, adjusting. Sister Agatha, despite her youth and energy, eventually succumbs to exhaustion, curling up on a bench nearby with her cloak pulled tight around her slender form. You continue alone, your movements a kind of prayer, a communion with knowledge. Passed through generations, near midnight, you determine the ink is ready. Using a clean cloth stretched over a wooden frame, another technique learned from your father, you strain the precious liquid into clay pots borrowed from the kitchen. The ink flows thick and glossy, deep black with hints of purple where light catches it. You set the filled pots near the banked fire to cure overnight, covering them with clean linen to protect from dust or curious hands. You wake Sister Agatha gently. It is done for now. Tomorrow we will test it, then make more. Dawn finds you both back at the scriptorium, where the abbess awaits with several senior sisters who have been informed of the urgent copying task. You present the first pot of ink with both pride and humility, aware of the weight of expectation. Sister Giovanna, the most experienced scribe, takes up a freshly cut quill and dips it into the dark liquid. She draws it across a scrap of parchment, creating a line of perfect blackness. All watch as the ink settles into the surface, neither bleeding nor remaining too proud of the page. It flows well, Sister Giovanna pronounces, writing a few words of scripture as a further test. And the color is remarkable, deeper than what we typically use. The abbess nods with satisfaction. Then we shall proceed. Sister Elisabetta, continue making ink as quickly as possible. Sisters, prepare your stations. We begin copying the Liber Medicinalium immediately. Over the next fortnight, you establish a rhythm. Each day, you and Sister Agatha produce 2 large pots of ink, enough to supply the 10 scribes working in shifts from dawn until dusk. The process becomes more efficient as you refine techniques, discovering that certain casks of wine produce better results than others, that resin collected from the eastern side of the cherry trees, where morning sun strikes first, dissolves more readily. The abbess divides the Liber Medicinalium into sections, assigning different scribes to different parts to speed the work. By the end of the second week, 3 complete copies have been produced, with 5 more underway. Each copy is checked meticulously against the original, ensuring no error creeps in that might lead to a mistaken treatment when lives depend on the information. Your hands become permanently stained with the evidence of your labor, nails rimmed, with black that no amount of scrubbing will remove. Sister Agatha jokes that you both bear the marks of your devotion as surely as the stigmata, though she crosses herself immediately after such irreverence, her young face solemn as she asks forgiveness for her light words. As February gives way to March, news arrives that the pestilence has reached villages less than 10 miles distant. The abbess orders the gates sealed as planned, with a small rotating group of sisters maintaining a quarantine house just outside the walls, where food and supplies can be left for the desperate without direct contact. The urgency of your task intensifies. More scribes are recruited, even those whose hands are less steady, to copy simpler remedies onto single sheets that can be distributed to laypeople seeking help. Your ink production doubles, the courtyard now permanently fragrant with the sharp smell of transformation. One evening, as you stir a particularly large batch, the abbess joins you, watching the hypnotic motion of your wooden paddle through the dark liquid. "My mother made ink," she says unexpectedly. "Before I was born, during the Great Famine of 1280, she told me how the monastery where my father worked as a steward had run out of writing materials, but important tax records needed to be maintained." You continue stirring, allowing her the space to speak. It is rare for the abbess to mention her life before taking vows. She used vine charcoal and honey, mixed with a little wine. She continues, "Not as lasting as what you create, but sufficient for their temporary needs. I remember thinking it miraculous as a child, that words could be preserved through such humble materials. It is a kind of everyday miracle, you agree. Transformation of the mundane into something that outlives us." The abbess smiles faintly, "like faith itself." She watches a moment longer, then adds, "8 complete copies now. By Easter, God willing, we will have 15, one for each of our sister communities throughout Tuscany and Umbria." Easter arrives. With no celebration beyond the most essential observances, the pestilence has reached the village at the foot of the hill, its progress marked by the smoke of funeral pyres visible from the abbey's highest windows. 3 sisters who had been working in the quarantine house show symptoms and are isolated in a remote building with prayers and remedies from the Liber Medicinalium. Despite the fear that permeates the community, the work continues. 17 complete copies have been produced, each bound in simple leather with the abbey's seal pressed into the cover. The abbess makes plans for their distribution when travel becomes possible again. Each book carries not just knowledge but hope, she tells the assembled sisters during chapter. Through your labor, lives may be saved generations hence. What greater service could we offer our Lord than to preserve the wisdom he has granted humanity? As April turns the hills green once more, a terrible milestone is reached. The pestilence enters the abbey despite all precautions. First one novice falls ill, then 3 more sisters within days. The community fractures into smaller groups to limit contagion, with the scriptorium work continuing in isolated cells rather than the common room. You and Sister Agatha move your ink-making operation to a small courtyard near the infirmary, where your creations can be quickly delivered to scribes working nearby. The rhythm of your days narrows to an intense focus. Pray, make ink, deliver it, sleep briefly, begin again. Fear becomes a constant companion, but purpose drives you forward. By May, the worst occurs. The abbess herself falls ill, her strong constitution finally succumbing to the invisible enemy that has claimed nearly a third of the community. From her sickbed, she summons you, her voice weak, but her mind still sharp. "The books," she whispers when you kneel beside her. "They must go out into the world now, while some of us remain to send them." "But how, Mother? The roads are unsafe. And who would carry them?" Her fever-bright eyes hold yours. "Brother Paolo's son is a merchant who travels with armed guards. He has agreed to take them, for a price the abbey can afford." She presses a parchment into your hand, a map with marked routes. 3 days hence, he will come to the east gate at dawn. Have 5 books ready, one for each destination marked. Here. You accept this trust with a solemn nod, understanding that these books represent her legacy as much as the abbey she has guided for 20 years. 3 days later, standing at the small postern gate in the east wall as pink light spreads. Across the valley, You hand over 5 precious volumes to a grim-faced man whose resemblance to Brother Paolo is evident despite his youth and vigor. He secures them in oiled cloth before placing them in special compartments in his saddlebags. "My father says your ink will outlast the parchment itself," he comments, studying your stained hands. A fitting vessel for knowledge that might save many. You watch him ride away, his guards forming a protective circle around him, until the group disappears into the morning mist that clings to the valleys. Something inside you eases slightly, knowing that what began in fear and haste now journeys outward, carrying hope in your father's recipe transformed by your hands. The abbess dies the following day. Her last words a blessing for the community she leaves behind. Sister Agatha is among those who prepare her body for burial, washing the small wasted form with herbs and wrapping it in simple linen. You stand vigil through the night, a single candle illuminating the parchment page on which you write her story with ink of your own making. How she foresaw the need, how she preserved wisdom against darkness. Summer comes, and with it, a gradual waning of the pestilence. Those sisters who survived, less than half the original community, emerge from isolation to rebuild their life together. In the abbess's chambers, sealed since her death, you find a letter addressed to you, written in her distinctive hand with the very first batch of ink you created together. "Knowledge is a flame that must be tended and passed from hand to hand," she wrote. "Remember always that in the darkest times, it is not gold or power that saves us, but the quiet wisdom preserved by careful hands. Your father's craft lives on in you, as this wisdom will live on in those who receive our books. There is no greater act of faith than to create in the face of destruction. Continue this work, Sister Elisabetta. Teach others. Let nothing of value be lost while you have breath to preserve it." You fold the letter carefully and tuck it into your habit, close to your heart. Outside, Sister Agatha, no longer a novice, but a fully professed sister after her courage during the worst days of sickness, calls your name. A messenger has arrived with news from Florence. One of the books has reached its destination and already been copied 3 more times. Together, you walk to the ink-making courtyard where fresh batches are underway, supervised by 2 young novices learning the craft under your guidance. The familiar smell of transformation, sour wine becoming something permanent and valuable, fills the air. Your hands reach for the stirring paddle, resuming their practiced motion, continuing the ancient alchemy that turns what is fleeting into what endures. As autumn approaches, word comes that all 5 books safely reach their destinations and have been copied multiple times. When winter returns, and with it the anniversary of your first ink making, the new abbess declares that the abbey will continue to produce its own ink rather than relying on merchants. Sister Elisabetta's ink has proven superior in every way, she announces. What began as necessity has become our strength. Like the vine that must be pruned to yield better fruit, our community has emerged from suffering with new purpose. That evening, you add a final page to your private record of those desperate days. A simple recipe for ink made from old wine, iron, oak galls, and cherry resin. At the bottom, you write, "Knowledge preserved is a light against darkness. May those who follow continue to tend the flame." Outside your window, snow begins to fall on the abbey grounds, covering all in pristine white. Within your small cell, black ink dries on parchment, fixing words that will speak long after your voice is silenced, a humble testament to the power of transformation, how that which is discarded can become that which endures. As the snow melts from memory, Time's gentle current carries you forward once more, depositing you in a new century where faithful hands continue the sacred work of transformation. The chill of autumn seeps through the thick stone walls of Fontevraud Abbey as you hurry through the cloisters, your wooden pattens clicking rhythmically against the flagstones. Dawn is just breaking, painting the eastern sky in delicate washes of pink and gold that remind you of the illustrations you've been studying for months. Your breath forms small clouds in the morning air as you make your way to the scriptorium, eager to arrive before the other sisters. The year is 1473, and your world is one of careful balance between tradition and cautious innovation. As a fully professed sister for nearly 12 years, you've earned the trust of the abbess and the respect of your sisters. Your position as assistant to Sister Marguerite, the aging illuminator whose eyesight is failing, but whose knowledge remains undiminished, has become the center of your devotion after your daily prayers. You slip through the heavy oak door of the scriptorium, welcoming the familiar smells that greet you. Parchment and leather, beeswax candles and dried herbs that Sister Marguerite keeps in small bundles near her desk. The room is silent this early. The writing stands empty. The morning, light just beginning to filter through the narrow window set high in the eastern wall, perfect for what you plan to do. Moving quietly to the small antechamber where materials are prepared, you retrieve the bundle you hid yesterday beneath a stack of cleaned parchment. A linen cloth containing oak galls you gathered from the forest, edged 2 days ago, during your assigned time for gathering medicinal plants. The steward had raised an eyebrow at the bulge in your apron, but asked no questions. Your reputation for diligence protects you from most suspicion. Sister Marguerite has been teaching you the art of illumination for years, showing you how to prepare pigments from minerals and plants, how to apply gold leaf so fine it seems to capture celestial light itself. But there is one secret she guards closely, one she has promised to share before death takes her, the formula for the deepest, most light-fast black ink used only for the most important manuscripts. When you are ready, she always says when you ask, her rheumy eyes crinkling with affection. The ink must mature with the illuminator, but you have watched her for years, noting quantities, observing techniques, and recently you found something unexpected. A small leather-bound book hidden behind a loose stone in the illumination chamber, written in Sister Marguerite's distinctive hand. A book of recipes, including one titled simply, "The Black That Endures." You memorized it, heart pounding with the transgression, yet certain that your motives were pure. You would prove your readiness. Now, with at least an hour before the scriptorium fills with sisters, you begin the process. First, you retrieve the small jar of soured wine you've been hiding behind the larger vinegar casks in the cellar. You selected it carefully, the remains of the communion wine from last Easter, turned, beautifully acidic over the summer months. The recipe had been specific. Communion wine carries spiritual potency that strengthens the ink's durability. You pour a measure into a small copper pot, judging the amount by eye, as you've seen Sister Marguerite do countless times. The smell rises sharp and fruity, with an edge that makes your nose wrinkle. Next come the oak galls, crushed to powder using the mortar and pestle normally reserved for grinding pigments. The powder is finer than flour, almost dust-like in its consistency. As you work, you murmur prayers under your breath. Not the formal Latin of the divine office, but simpler, older prayers Sister Marguerite taught you. Prayers to Saint Columba, patron of illuminators, and to Saint John, whose gospel begins with the word. Bless these humble materials, you whisper, that they might give form to sacred truth. The next ingredient is one you've prepared in advance, iron sulfate, which Sister Marguerite calls green vitriol in her notes. You obtained it from the infirmary stores where it's kept for treating certain skin ailments. The small green crystals dissolve in the wine with a faint hissing sound, turning the liquid darker. You stir carefully with a wooden rod, watching the transformation with fascination. Time slips away as you focus on your work, measuring, mixing, heating the mixture gently over a small brazier. The final ingredient, gum arabic, comes from your own secret supply, purchased with coins saved from the small payment you receive for copying music manuscripts for neighboring monasteries. The amber lumps dissolve slowly in warmed wine, creating a sticky solution that you strain through clean linen before adding to the main mixture. So absorbed are you in the process that you don't hear the door open or notice the presence behind you until a voice speaks, causing you to nearly drop your stirring rod. So this is why you've been gathering oak galls when the dyers have no need of them. You turn to find Sister Marguerite herself standing in the doorway, her tall figure stooped now with age, but her presence still commanding. Your heart sinks, guilt and fear rising in equal measure. You've been caught in unauthorized work, using materials that technically belong to the Abbey without permission. Sister Marguerite, you begin, but she raises a hand to silence you. She approaches slowly, eyes fixed not on your face, but on the pot of ink taking form before you. She bends to examine it, inhaling the aroma with closed eyes. After what seems an eternity, she speaks again. You found my book. It isn't a question. You nod, unable to lie to her. Yes, sister. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but I wanted to prove yourself ready. She completes your thought with a surprising lack of anger. As I did with Sister Agnes 40 years ago when I was your age, and just as impatient. She straightens and looks at you properly then, her clouded eyes somehow seeing straight to your soul. Did you follow the measurements exactly? And the prayers? Yes, sister, you reply, relief beginning to replace fear, though I wasn't certain about the final prayer, the one invoking St. Hildegard. The writing was faded. A smile tugs at her thin lips. That is because I added it myself. Hildegard understood the hidden properties of God's creation better than most. She gestures to the pot. Let me see your work thus far. You step aside as she examines the ink, dipping a clean quill into the mixture and drawing it across a scrap of parchment. The line it creates is deep and rich, with an almost bluish undertone in the oblique morning light. Sister Marguerite nods, slowly. Good consistency, not perfect. The balance of iron is slightly too high, which will cause it to eat into the parchment over many decades, but better than my first attempt. She looks at you with newfound respect. You've been paying closer attention than I realized. I watch everything you do, you admit. I've wanted to learn this particular skill for so long, and yet you never ask directly why I withhold this knowledge. You lower your eyes. It wasn't my place to question your judgment, sister. Sister Marguerite sighs, lowering herself onto a nearby stool. Bring your work and sit with me. There is something I must explain. Something I would have told you soon in any case. You carefully move the pot off the heat and join her, curiosity overcoming embarrassment. Sister Marguerite rarely speaks of her past or the origins of her knowledge. Today, it seems, will be different. This ink recipe, she begins, gesturing to the cooling mixture, came to me from my teacher, Sister Agnes, who received it from her teacher before her. It traces back through generations of women, not all of them within abbey walls. My grandmother was among them, a widow who made her living copying legal documents in Avignon during the papal residence there. You listen, entranced. Sister Marguerite has never before mentioned family from before her religious life. The method itself, she continues, is far older than any of us. They say it originated with Pliny the Elder, though the formula has been refined through the centuries. What makes our version special is not just the ingredients, but the timing and the prayers that accompany each stage. She looks at you intently. Do you know why I've withheld this knowledge from you, despite your obvious talent? You shake your head, not trusting yourself to speak. Because this ink is more than a tool, it is a responsibility. Words written with it will outlast not just us, but generations to come. What we commit to parchment with this ink becomes, in a very real sense, immortal. She reaches for your hand, examining the permanent stains that mark your fingers after years of working with pigments and inks. I needed to be certain you understood the weight of that power before sharing it, that you would use it only for truth, for beauty, for God's greater glory. Her words settle around you like a mantle, heavy with implication. And now, you ask, quietly. A smile spreads across her weathered face. And now I find you making it without permission, risking punishment, because your desire to learn could not be contained, just as I did. She chuckles softly. There is a certain justice in that. She releases your hand and gestures to the pot. The mixture needs more work. Come, I will show you what was missing from the book, the things I never wrote down because they must be shown, not told. For the next hour, as the scriptorium gradually fills with sisters beginning their daily work, you and Sister Marguerite remain in the antechamber, bent over the ink pot like alchemists. She shows you how to test the ink's viscosity by letting it drip from a quill, how to adjust it with minute additions of gum arabic or rainwater. She teaches you to recognize by smell and appearance when the mixture has reached its optimal state. This batch will be good, she pronounces finally. Not excellent, that comes only with practice, but certainly good enough for important manuscripts. As if on cue, the abbess herself appears at the door of the antechamber. Mother Jeanne is younger than many of the sisters she leads, elevated to her position due to her noble connections, as much as her piety and intelligence. Still, she has proven a capable leader in the 5 years since her appointment, and her appreciation for the scriptorium's work has endeared her to the scribes and illuminators. Sister Marguerite, Sister Marie-Claire, she greets you both with a slight inclination of her head. I've been looking for you. A messenger arrived this morning from Tours. You exchange glances with Sister Marguerite. The cathedral at Tours occasionally commissions manuscripts from Fontevraud, but such requests usually come with more ceremony than a simple messenger. The bishop himself writes, the abbess continues, producing a sealed letter. He requests our finest work, a complete book of hours to be presented to the king when he visits the cathedral next Easter. Sister Marguerite accepts the letter with hands that tremble slightly, breaking the seal to examine the specific requirements. As she reads, her expression grows solemn. This is no ordinary commission, she says finally. The bishop requests illuminations of exceptional quality, with gold leaf throughout and the finest inks. The text must be perfect, without error or correction. She looks up at the abbess. This will require our best materials and most skilled hands. Mother Jeanne nods. I have already assured the messenger we will accept the commission. The payment offered is generous and will see us through the coming winter with comfort. She glances at the pot of ink cooling nearby. I see you, are already preparing special materials. Sister Marie Claire has been learning the formula for our finest ink, Sister Marguerite explains, a note of pride in her voice that warms your heart. It seems Providence guided her hands today, knowing they would soon be needed for this important work. The abbess studies you with new interest. Then you will assist Sister Marguerite with this commission. Your hand is steady, and your colour work on the St. Cecilia antiphonal was much praised. Yes, Mother Abbess, you stammer, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn. From potential punishment to prestigious commission in the space of a single morning. Good. I will inform the chapter of this project at our meeting today. You are both released from certain communal duties until the work is complete. With a final nod, she departs, her keys jingling softly at her belt. When she is gone, Sister Marguerite turns to you with eyes that sparkle despite their cloudiness. Do you understand now why the timing of your initiative seems divinely inspired? This commission requires the very best we can create, and my hands are no longer steady enough for the finest work. I mean that you will do the actual illumination under my guidance. She gestures to the cooling ink. And you will use this, your first batch of true black, to outline the most important figures. A fitting beginning to your career as a master illuminator. The reality of what she's saying slowly dawns on you. This isn't just assistance. This is succession. Sister Marguerite is naming you her heir in the art that has defined her life's work. I'm not ready, you whisper, suddenly afraid. None of us ever feel ready for what God calls us to do, she replies simply. Yet he provides what we lack when we step forward in faith. In the days that follow, the scriptorium transforms into a workshop focused almost entirely on the royal commission. The finest calfskins are selected for parchment, carefully scraped and prepared by the most experienced sisters. Pigments are inventoried, and Sister Marguerite sends requests to merchants in Tours and even Paris for materials of exceptional quality. Ultramarine made from precious lapis lazuli, vermilion of the brightest red, gold leaf of the highest purity. You continue, making ink now with Sister Marguerite's full guidance and blessing. She teaches you variations on the basic formula, how a touch of indigo creates a black with cool undertones perfect for night scenes, how a slightly higher proportion of oak galls yields an ink that dries with a subtle matte finish rather than gloss. Each manuscript has its own character, she explains, and the ink should complement that character. For a royal book of hours, we need an ink with presence and dignity, one that will stand proud on the page while remaining perfectly legible. You discover that different wines create subtly different inks. Sister Marguerite sends you to the cellarer, Sister Thérèse, with instructions to sample wines from different regions and vintages. The crusty old nun who guards the abbey's wine stores raises her eyebrows at these requests, but complies when Sister Marguerite explains their purpose. For the king, is it? Sister Thérèse says, leading you deep into the cellar where special wines are kept. Well then, we must do our part. She selects a bottle with reverent hands. This wine came from the royal vineyards at Chinon, a gift when the king's mother visited 10 years ago. It turned before we could use it all, but I kept it knowing. Quality even in decay. The wine from Chinon proves perfect. Its higher tannin content creates an ink of exceptional blackness, while its pedigree adds a story that will please the royal recipient. You mark the bottle clearly as reserved for the special commission. As autumn deepens into winter, work on the Book of Hours progresses. The scribes complete the text blocks, their perfect Gothic lettering flowing across the pages with mathematical precision. Now comes your role, the illumination that will transform mere words into a treasure fit for a king. Sister Marguerite and you develop a rhythm of collaboration. Each evening, you discuss the next day's work, planning the composition of miniatures, the decorative borders, the elaborate initial capitals that will begin important sections. Each morning, you prepare the materials needed, grinding pigments, mixing colors, readying your precious inks. The first time you dip your finest sable brush into the ink you created and touch it to the parchment, your hand trembles slightly. This is not practice, but purpose, creating something that will outlive you by centuries. Sister Marguerite notices your hesitation and places her hand briefly on your shoulder. "Remember the prayers," she murmurs. "Let them guide your hand." You breathe deeply and begin the outline for the Annunciation scene that will mark the beginning of the Hours of the Virgin, the most important section of the manuscript. The ink flows from your brush like liquid shadow, defining the angel Gabriel's wings, Mary's humble pose, the architecture of the space that contains this holy moment. The line is perfect, neither too thick nor too thin, with a consistency that holds its shape precisely. "Good," Sister Marguerite approves, watching over your shoulder. "Your hand is steadier than mine ever was." Day by day, the pages come alive under your brush. You discover that the special ink has qualities beyond its perfect blackness. It seems almost to guide the brush, to flow with intention rather than merely responding to your hand. When you mention this to Sister Marguerite, she smiles knowingly. "That is why we pray during its making," she says. "Ink from wine carries the spirit of its origin, the sun that ripened the grapes, the earth that nourished the vines, the monks or nuns who tended them with prayers on their lips. When we add our own prayers in the making, we create something that lives between mere material and divine instrument." As Christmas approaches, the abbess visits the scriptorium frequently, checking on the progress of the royal commission. Her expression grows increasingly pleased as she sees the pages taking form. Gold leaf catching the winter light like captured sunshine. Colors glowing with an intensity that seems to emanate from within, rather than merely sitting on the surface. "The bishop's representative will visit after Epiphany to assess our progress," she informs you one frosty morning. "I have every confidence he will be impressed. The knowledge adds pressure to your already meticulous work. Each brush stroke must be perfect, each color pure, each detail rendered with absolute precision. You find yourself working through the daylight hours without pause, stopping only when the light fails and Sister Marguerite insists you rest your eyes. Strain will show in the work, she warns when she finds you squinting at a particularly delicate gold border by candlelight. Better to wait for God's light than ruin your sight with artificial illumination. January arrives with bitter cold that seeps through the stone walls and makes the pigments sluggish. You discover techniques to counter the chill, keeping small pots of color nested in containers of warm sand, working near the brazier, but not so close that the heat affects the parchment. Your special ink, you note with satisfaction, flows perfectly, regardless of temperature. Another mark of its superior formulation. The bishop's representative, a thin cleric named Father Martin with the sharp eyes of a former scribe, arrives during a snowstorm in mid-January. After warming himself by the abbess's private fire, he is brought to the scriptorium to inspect the work in progress. His expression remains carefully neutral as he examines each completed page, but his fingers, stained with the indelible marks of one who has spent years with ink and parchment, move reverently over the surfaces, careful never to touch the pigments directly. "The outlines," he says finally, looking up at Sister Marguerite. "I have not seen black of this quality in many. Years. Paris itself would struggle to match it. Sister Marie-Claire's formulation, Sister Marguerite replies, nodding in your direction. Made from wine of the king's own vineyards at Chinon. Father Martin's eyebrows rise slightly. Indeed, a fitting tribute. He studies you with new interest. The bishop will be pleased. This manuscript will reflect well on Fontevraud and on Tours when it is presented to His Majesty. After his departure, bearing a detailed report for his master, work continues with renewed vigor. The abbess, pleased with Father Martin's reaction, arranges for special dispensations, extra candles, finer foods to sustain the illuminators, energies, even a rare brazier of charcoal rather than wood to provide cleaner heat that won't risk depositing soot on the precious pages. February brings illness to the abbey, a fever that sweeps through the community, confining many sisters to the infirmary. You worry about contagion affecting the manuscript work, but Sister Marguerite has a solution. The two of you move your materials to a small, seldom used chapel attached to the abbess's quarters, working in isolation until the sickness passes. In this intimate space, lit by tall windows that catch the strengthening late winter sun, Sister Marguerite begins to share more of her knowledge. Not just techniques, but philosophy, the deeper meanings behind the art of illumination. Why do we call it illumination and not merely illustration? She asks one afternoon as you work, side by side, on a complex scene of Christ's baptism. You consider the question while carefully applying gold leaf to the rays descending from heaven. Because we bring light to the page, the gold and bright colors. Partly, she nods, but more, fundamentally because we bring God's light through our work. We illuminate not just parchment, but understanding. The images we create allow those who cannot read, or who read without full comprehension, to see the divine truths contained in the words. She dips a brush into a pot of ultramarine, the precious blue made from stone carried along the silk, rode from distant mountains. This color cost more than gold, weight for weight. Why do we use it so lavishly for the Virgin's robes? To show her importance, you begin, then pause, considering more deeply. No. To show that what appears most precious to worldly eyes, gold, is secondary to the spiritual blue of heaven, of contemplation, of faithful devotion. Sister Marguerite smiles. You understand. And the black that contains it all. Your special ink that defines every figure, every building, every tree. You look at your ink pot, the surface reflecting a perfect miniature of the window above. It creates order from chaos. It separates light from darkness. It is the Word made visible. Yes. Her gnarled hand covers yours briefly. That is why its making is sacred. That is why wine that once was consecrated makes the finest ink. It carries the memory of transformation, of ordinary substance becoming extraordinary through faith and intention. As March arrives and the manuscript nears completion, Sister Marguerite falls ill. Not with the fever that swept the abbey, but with the weight of her years. She continues to direct your work from her bed in the infirmary, examining each page. You bring to her with critical eyes that miss nothing despite their clouding. The final page, she instructs, her voice weaker, but her mind still sharp. The coronation of the Virgin. It must be your masterpiece within this masterpiece. You spend days planning this ultimate illustration, sketching compositions, mixing colors, preparing the finest gold leaf. For the outlines, you make a final batch of special ink, using the last of the Chinon wine and performing every step with focused prayer. As Easter approaches, you work from dawn until the bells of Compline force you to stop. The coronation scene takes shape beneath your brush. Mary kneeling before the Trinity, Christ placing a crown upon her head, angels surrounding the scene in concentric circles of radiance. Your special ink defines each figure with perfect precision, creating a framework that contains and enhances the brilliant colors. 3 days before Easter, as you add the final touches to the manuscript, Sister Marguerite asks to be brought to the scriptorium. 2 novices help her into a chair by your working table, arranging blankets around her thin frame. Her eyes, though dimmed by age, shine with anticipation. "Let me see," she whispers. You place the completed Book of Hours before her, turning the pages slowly so she can appreciate every detail. When you reach the coronation scene, tears form in her cloudy eyes. "It is perfect," she says simply. "Your ink has captured light itself." The following day, the manuscript is carefully bound in crimson velvet over wooden boards, with silver clasps commissioned months earlier from a silversmith in Tours. The completed book is placed in a cedar box lined with silk, ready for the journey to the cathedral, where it will be presented to the king during Easter Mass. That night, Sister Marguerite calls for you one last time. She lies in the infirmary, her breathing labored, but her mind clear. From beneath her pillow, she withdraws a small object wrapped in linen. "My book," she says, pressing it into your hands. "The one you found. It belongs to you now, with my blessing. Add to it as I did, and pass it on when your time comes." You accept the gift with tears, recognizing it as the true inheritance, not just recipes, but a connection to a lineage of women who transformed humble materials into vessels for divine truth. Sister Marguerite passes peacefully in the pre-dawn hours of Good Friday. You sit with her body until the bell calls you to prayer, your hands still stained with the ink you created together, her small book tucked safely in your pocket. On Easter Sunday, as bells ring throughout Christendom celebrating resurrection and renewal, a messenger arrives at Fontevraud with news. The king was so pleased with the Book of Hours that he has commissioned a complete Bible to be produced by the same hands. The work will take years and will secure the abbey's financial future for a generation. That evening, alone in the scriptorium, you open Sister Marguerite's book to add your own notes about the special ink that helped create a masterpiece. On the final page, you find a message written in her distinctive hand, clearly added recently despite her weakness. To Sister Marie-Claire, my daughter in art and spirit, remember always that our work with ink made from wine reflects God's greater work in us. As humble grapes become the blood of Christ, as sour wine becomes enduring ink, so too are we transformed through faithful service. May your hands remain steady, your eyes clear, and your heart pure as you continue the work of bringing light to darkness. You trace the words with stained fingertips, feeling the slight texture of the ink raised on the page. Ink that you now know how to create. Ink that connects you to generations past and those yet to come. Tomorrow, you will begin teaching a promising novice the first steps in grinding oak galls to precise consistency. The knowledge will continue, transformed but unbroken, like faith itself. Outside, spring rain begins to fall gently on the abbey grounds, nourishing vines that will produce wine that will, in its time, become word and image through your faithful hands. The soft rainfall of Fontevraud fades as time shifts once more, carrying you to yet another sacred space where wine's transformation continues through dedicated hands and ancient wisdom. You wipe perspiration from your brow as the September sun beats down on the abbey vineyard. The year is 1522, and the grape harvest at Kloster Eberbach has begun in earnest. Around you, lay brothers and hired peasants move methodically through the rows of vines that climb the steep slopes of the Rheingau. Their hands work with practiced efficiency, cutting clusters of Riesling grapes and placing them gently in woven baskets that, when full, are carried to ox-drawn carts waiting on the narrow track below. Your role is not to harvest, but to oversee, to ensure that only the finest grapes are selected for the Abbey's renowned wine. As cellarer of Eberbach for the past 8 years, you are responsible for all that sustains the community: food stores, wine production, management of the extensive lands that provide the monastery's income. At 42, Brother Thomas, you have found your calling in this work that connects earth and spirit, practical provision and divine sustenance. The heavy silver keys at your belt jingle softly as you move between the rows, occasionally stopping to taste a grape or inspect a particularly fine cluster. The sweetness on your tongue carries promises of the wine to come, clear and vibrant, with the distinctive mineral character that comes from the slate soil of these hillsides. A good year, Brother Thomas. The voice belongs to Brother Michael, the elderly monk who served as cellarer before you and now assists with harvest oversight. His weathered face, tanned by decades of sun, creases into a smile. Very good, you confirm, offering him a grape from your palm. The summer heat came at just the right time, and the rains in August prevented the vines from stressing too severely. If the weather holds for another week, this could be among our finest vintages. Brother Michael nods in satisfaction, his eyes scanning the hillside where the Abbey's vineyards stretch in orderly rows. God has blessed us again. The abbot will be pleased. He pauses, then adds in a lower voice. He mentioned plans for a special batch this year. Your interest quickens. Special in what way? For the scriptorium. The old supplies are nearly exhausted. Brother Michael gives you a meaningful look. As former cellarer, he remains one of the few brothers who know certain Abbey secrets, including the special relationship between the vineyard and the scriptorium. You nod, understanding. While the majority of Eberbach's wine is produced for communion, the Abbey table, or sale to nobles and merchants, a small portion has always been set aside for another purpose: the making of ink. Not ordinary ink for everyday writing, but the exceptional black used for the finest manuscripts and documents that must endure for centuries. Has Brother Anselm spoken to you about his needs? You ask, referring to the monastery's master scribe. Not yet. The abbot suggested you should approach him once harvest is complete. Brother Michael picks up a fallen grape, examining it before continuing. The bishop has commissioned an illustrated Bible, the first major manuscript project since the troubles began. The troubles he refers to need no elaboration between you. The spreading Lutheran movement has created turmoil throughout German lands, challenging the very foundations of monastic life. Eberbach has thus far been spared the worst. No angry mobs have breached its walls. No iconoclasts have destroyed its treasures. But the Abbey's commissions have dwindled as uncertainty pervades the region. A Bible commission from the bishop represents not just income, but affirmation of the community's continuing relevance. The work must be exceptional in every aspect, including its materials. I'll speak with Brother Anselm tomorrow. You decide. We should select the vines today, before harvest progresses too far. Brother Michael nods approvingly. The southeastern rows, he suggests. Where the oldest vines grow, they've always produced the best ink wine. You spend the next hour identifying specific vines whose fruit will be harvested separately. Gnarled veterans planted by brothers long dead, their roots reaching deep into the slate soil. The grapes from these vines appear no different to untrained eyes, but experience has taught that they produce wine with higher acidity and tannins, qualities that make for exceptional ink when properly processed. As the sun begins its descent toward the Rhine Valley, you instruct 2 trusted lay brothers in the careful harvesting of these selected vines. The grapes must be picked only at peak ripeness, handled minimally, and transported separately to the abbey's press house. By sunset, 3 small baskets sit apart from the main harvest, enough to produce perhaps 20 litres of special wine, a quantity that should suffice for the scriptorium's needs for several years if carefully managed. The following morning, after lauds and a simple breakfast of bread and ale, you make your way to the scriptorium. Located in the eastern wing of the abbey complex, the large room is illuminated by tall windows that capture morning light. 8 writing desks, angled to maximize the natural illumination, occupy the central space. Around the perimeter, smaller tables hold materials for preparing parchment, mixing pigments, and binding completed works. Brother Anselm hunches over a desk near the window, his tall frame bent like a bow as he examines a piece of parchment through a crystal magnifying lens. At 63, his hands remain remarkably steady, though he now reserves them for the most important work, leaving routine copying to younger scribes. Brother Celera, he greets you without looking up, somehow sensing your presence. Come to discuss the bishop's commission. Word travels quickly, you observe, approaching his desk. He sets aside the lens and straightens, wincing slightly as his back protests. The abbot informed me yesterday, a complete Bible with illuminated chapter headings and 20 full-page illustrations, the largest project we've undertaken in my lifetime. The pride in his voice is evident and justified. Brother Anselm has served in this scriptorium for over 40 years, rising from novice copyist to master scribe. Under his guidance, Eberbach has maintained its reputation for exceptional manuscript production, despite competition from printing presses in Mainz and Frankfurt. I understand you'll need special materials, you say, coming directly to the point. Brother, Anselm's weathered face breaks into a small smile. Ah, so Brother Michael has mentioned the ink wine. Yes, our supply of the special ink has dwindled. The last batch was made 7 years ago, and we've been rationing it for essential documents only. He rises and leads you to a small adjoining room, his private workspace, where the most valuable materials are stored under lock and key. From a cabinet, he retrieves a glass bottle sealed with wax, containing a liquid so dark it appears black until he holds it against the light, revealing deep purple-brown depths. This is all that remains, he says. Enough for perhaps one more major document, certainly not for a complete Bible. You nod, unsurprised. We harvested the special vines yesterday. The wine should be ready for your purpose by early spring. You hesitate, then ask, will you teach one of the younger brothers? The process this time? The knowledge should not rest with too few. A shadow passes across Brother Anselm's face. The abbot has suggested the same. These are uncertain times, and wisdom that isn't shared may be lost. He sighs deeply. Very well. Brother Johannes has the right temperament. Patient, meticulous. I'll instruct him when the time comes. You leave the scriptorium satisfied with this arrangement, but also thoughtful. Brother Anselm's reluctance to share his knowledge is not born of pride, but of caution. The special ink represents a tradition stretching back centuries, one that could be misunderstood in these times when old practices are increasingly viewed with suspicion. The weeks of winemaking that follow harvest are among your busiest of the year. The main vintage requires constant attention, monitoring fermentation, making decisions about racking, ensuring the cellars maintain proper temperature as autumn progresses toward winter. Yet you find time each day to personally tend the small casks of special wine, which follows a different process from the main production. While the abbey's drinking wine is carefully preserved from turning, the ink wine is deliberately encouraged toward acidity. The casks remain unsealed, allowing controlled exposure to air. You taste it weekly, tracking its transformation from sweet grape juice to increasingly tart wine, and finally to a liquid that puckers the mouth with its sharpness. By December, with snow blanketing the vineyard slopes, the special wine has reached the perfect level of acidification. You transfer it to sealed stoneware jugs to arrest further development, storing them in the coolest part of the cellar to await spring, when Brother Anselm will transform the liquid from sustenance for the body to nourishment for the mind and soul. Winter passes in the rhythms of monastic life, prayers marking the hours, communal meals in the refectory, where a brother reads aloud from holy texts while others eat in silence, periods of work interspersed with study and contemplation. The political tensions beyond the abbey walls seem distant during these months, though occasionally travellers bring news of churches stripped of images or monasteries forced to close in regions where Lutheran ideas have taken strongest hold. During this time, preparation for the Bishop's Bible Commission proceeds. Brother Anselm and his team calculate the parchment needed, requiring the skins of nearly 300 calves, a significant expense even for an institution with Eberbach's resources. Quills are prepared by the hundreds, pigments inventoried, gold leaf ordered from Frankfurt. The abbot himself inspects these preparations, understanding that the project represents not just income, but prestige, and perhaps most importantly, a declaration of Eberbach's continued relevance in a rapidly changing world. In March, as the first green shoots appear in the vineyard, Brother Anselm sends word that he is ready to begin the ink-making process. You personally carry the first jug of special wine to the small workshop adjoining the scriptorium, where Brother Johannes, a serious young monk of perhaps 25 years, awaits with his master. The workshop smells of parchment, beeswax, and the distinctive mineral scent of pigments. A small furnace in the corner provides heat, both for warmth and for certain preparation processes. Various bowls, mortars, sieves, and other implements are arranged with monastic precision on wooden shelves and tables. Place it there, brother, Anselm directs, indicating a sturdy work table covered with clean linen. And stay if you wish. It seems fitting that the cellarer who tended the wine should witness its transformation. You remain, curious to observe the process you've supported from its beginning in the vineyard, but never witnessed in its completion. Brother Anselm moves with ceremonial deliberation, first washing his hands in a basin of clean water, then donning a special apron of heavy linen stained with the marks of previous work. First, we give thanks, he says, directing this as much to Brother Johannes as to you. The three of you bow your heads as he intones a simple prayer. Lord, who transformed water to wine at Cana, bless now our work as we transform wine into the Yau, medium that will carry your holy word to generations yet unborn. Guide our hands in your service. Amen. He breaks the seal on the jug and pours a measure of the wine into a copper pot, its deep ruby color catching the light from the window. The sharp smell immediately fills the small room. Not unpleasant, but intense, the scent of transformation already begun. Smell it, Brother Anselm instructs Johannes. Know it. The nose guides as much as the eye in this work. The young monk obediently leans forward, inhaling deeply. It smells alive, he observes with surprise. Brother Anselm nods approvingly. Yes, though we think of ink as fixed and permanent, it begins as something dynamic, something changing. Our task is to capture that life and direct it toward permanence. He places the pot over the furnace, adjusting the fire carefully. We must reduce it slowly. Too hot, and essential qualities are lost. Too cool, and the transformation lacks vigor. While the wine begins to simmer, Brother Anselm retrieves a small cloth bag from a cedar cabinet. Oak galls, he explains, emptying small round objects that resemble wooden nuts onto the table. Collected from the forest last autumn after they fell naturally from the trees. He selects several and places them in a heavy stone mortar. Observe their weight, their hardness, he tells Johannes. The best are those without exit holes, meaning the wasp larvae remained trapped within, never emerging. These contain the highest concentration of tannic acid. With practiced movements, he begins crushing the galls, reducing them to a fine powder that he transfers to a small bowl. Throughout this process, he maintains a running commentary for Johannes's benefit, explaining each step with the precision of a man who has performed these actions hundreds of times over decades. Now, he says when the wine has reduced by approximately 1/3, we add the oak gall powder, slowly, stirring continuously in a clockwise direction. Brother Johannes follows these instructions with careful attention, his young face solemn, with concentration as he sprinkles the powder into the simmering liquid while stirring with a wooden rod. The mixture darkens noticeably, changing from ruby red to deep brown. Good, Brother Anselm approves. Now we let this continue to reduce while we prepare the iron. From another cabinet, he produces a small leather pouch containing what appear to be rusty nails, metal filings, and unidentifiable iron fragments. These come from the monastery forge, he explains, collected over years. The older and more rusted, the better for our purpose. He demonstrates how to wrap a measured amount of iron pieces in a square of linen, creating a small bundle that he suspends in the simmering liquid, using a string tied to a wooden rod that spans the pot's diameter. The iron must infuse slowly, he explains. Direct addition would cause the reaction to occur too quickly, resulting in an unstable ink. As the mixture continues to simmer, the workshop fills with a complex aroma, part vinegar, part earth, part something indefinable that speaks of ancient knowledge and transformation. You find yourself thinking of the vineyard where this process began, how the vines drew sustenance from soil and sun, how generations of brothers tended those vines with the understanding that their work served purposes both immediate and distant, both physical and spiritual. Brother Thomas looks thoughtful, Brother Anselm observes, glancing at you, perhaps contemplating the circular nature of our work. You nod, surprised at how accurately he has read your thoughts. The connection between vineyard and scriptorium, it's not one I fully appreciated before. Few do, he replies. Most see only separate tasks, growing grapes, making wine, writing manuscripts. But all are links in a chain of creation. He turns to Brother Johannes. Remember this when you become impatient with the slow steps of our craft. What we do connects to what others have done before us and what still others will do after we are gone. The young monk nods solemnly, clearly struck by the significance of what he is learning. Not just a technique, but a philosophy, a way of understanding his place in the ongoing work of the monastery and, by extension, in God's continuing creation. The process continues throughout the day. The mixture reduces further. darkening to a deep black brown as the iron slowly dissolves. Brother Anselm demonstrates how to test the ink's progress by placing a drop on a scrap of parchment, observing how it flows and settles, checking its color and opacity. As afternoon light slants through the workshop windows, he judges the mixture ready for the final ingredient. From a small glass jar, he removes several pieces of amber-colored resin. Gum arabic, he explains, from trees that grow in distant lands. It gives the ink its proper consistency and helps it adhere permanently to parchment. The resin is ground to powder and dissolved in a separate small pot of warmed water, creating a sticky solution that is then strained through fine linen before being added to the main mixture. Brother Anselm demonstrates the precise stirring technique required at this stage. Slow, deliberate movements that incorporate the gum without creating bubbles that would interfere with the ink's smooth flow from quill to parchment. By the time the Vespers bell rings across the abbey grounds, the first batch of ink has been completed, strained one final time, and poured into small earthenware pots that will be sealed with wax once the contents have cooled. The quantity is modest, perhaps enough for a few chapters of the Bible, but Brother Anselm explains that they will repeat the process weekly until sufficient supply has been prepared for the entire project. The ink must rest for at least 7 days before use, he instructs Johannes. During this time, it completes its transformation. Like wine itself, it improves with proper aging. As you prepare to leave for evening prayers, Brother Anselm draws you aside. "Thank you for the exceptional wine," he says quietly. "Its quality will be reflected in the permanence of the words it forms." "I merely tended what God and nature provided," you reply modestly. He smiles, the expression softening his austere features. "As do we all in our various ways." He glances toward Brother Johannes, who is carefully cleaning the implements used during the day's work. The young brother has good hands and an attentive mind. The knowledge will continue, God willing. You nod, understanding the deeper concern beneath his words. In these uncertain times, the continuation of ancient practices can no longer be taken for granted. You think of the vineyard, of the special vines selected for ink wine, of how this knowledge too must be passed to younger brothers who will carry it forward. Perhaps next harvest, you suggest, I should have Brother Martin assist with selecting the special vines. He has a good palate and careful hands. Brother Anselm nods approvingly. Yes, we must plant for orchards we may never sit beneath, and tend vines whose wine we may never taste. That is our duty to those who come after. Over the weeks that follow, you find yourself visiting the scriptorium more frequently than your duties strictly require. You watch as the Bible project progresses. First the preparation of parchment, then the careful ruling of pages. Finally, the beginning of the actual writing. Brother Anselm himself writes the opening words of Genesis with a newly cut quill dipped in the special ink you helped create. The black liquid flows onto the parchment, forming letters of perfect clarity that seem to possess an inner luminosity, despite their darkness. "In the beginning was the Word," Brother Anselm murmurs as he writes, quoting not Genesis, but John's Gospel. "That's from a different book," Brother Johannes points out hesitantly. Brother Anselm smiles. "Indeed, but appropriate nonetheless. In the beginning was the Word, and here we are, giving physical form to that eternal Word, using gifts of creation transformed by human hands, guided by divine purpose." You observe this exchange with appreciation for the older monk's wisdom. In connecting vineyard and scriptorium, grape and word, He reveals the underlying unity of the monastery's diverse works, all serving to manifest God's presence in the world through careful stewardship of creation's gifts. As spring progresses into summer, the Bible project continues steadily. Each week, another batch of special ink is prepared, each time with Brother Johannes taking greater responsibility under Brother Anselm's watchful eye. By midsummer, the young monk can perform most steps independently, though he still defers to his master for final judgments on consistency and readiness. In the vineyard, the new season's growth holds promise. You pay particular attention to the special vines, ensuring they receive optimal care. Brother Martin, a thoughtful monk of 30 who has assisted in the cellars for 5 years, accompanies you on these inspections, listening carefully as you explain what makes these vines different, why their fruit is reserved for purposes beyond wine for table or altar. The connection seems almost mystical. Brother Martin observes one warm July morning as you examine the developing grape clusters. You consider his comment carefully before responding. In these times, accusations of mysticism can carry danger. Yet there is truth in his observation that cannot be denied. Perhaps not mystical, you suggest, but certainly profound. The same fruit that becomes Christ's blood in the sacrament also becomes the medium through which his word is preserved and shared. There is a theological symmetry there worth contemplating. Brother Martin nods, satisfied with this more orthodox framing. Will we increase the number of vines dedicated to ink production this year? Brother Anselm mentioned other projects may follow the Bible. A prudent suggestion, you agree. When we prune next winter, we'll take cuttings from the oldest vines and establish a new row specifically for this purpose. As summer fades into autumn and another harvest approaches, news reaches the abbey of increasing tensions in the region. Several smaller religious houses have been abandoned, their brothers or sisters dispersing rather than facing potential violence from radical reformers. The abbot calls for special prayers, but also practical preparations. Valuable manuscripts and sacred vessels are moved to more secure storage, arrangements made with noble patrons for emergency sanctuary if needed. In this atmosphere of uncertainty, the Bible project takes on even greater significance. Work accelerates, with scribes sometimes continuing by candlelight well after sunset. The special ink, with its superior light fastness and permanence, seems especially precious now, a defiance against forces that would erase centuries of tradition and faith. The new harvest comes, and once again you oversee the careful selection and processing of grapes from the special vines. This time, you increase the quantity, sensing that the scriptorium's needs may grow in coming years. Brother Martin works alongside you, learning each step with diligent attention. One evening after Compline, as you check the fermenting wine in the cellar, you discover the abbot waiting in the cool darkness. His face, illuminated only by the small oil lamp he carries, shows the strain of recent months. Brother Thomas, he greets you. How proceeds the special wine? P. Well, Father Abbot, this year's batch promises to be exceptional. The balance of sweetness and acidity in the grapes was perfect. He nods, then asks unexpectedly, could you show me the process? Not the entire transformation to ink. I understand that is Brother Anselm's domain, but the wine preparation that precedes it. Surprised but pleased by his interest, you guide him to the separate area where the ink wine ferments. You explain each step, how this wine, unlike that intended for drinking, is deliberately exposed to controlled oxidation, how its developing acidity is monitored through regular tasting, how the timing of transfer to storage vessels affects the final product. The abbot listens with unexpected intensity, occasionally asking precise questions that reveal greater knowledge of winemaking than you had attributed to him. Finally, he explains his interest. I have been corresponding with abbots of houses in safer regions, particularly in Spain, where the reform has made little headway. It seems prudent to share certain knowledge more widely in case. He doesn't complete the thought, but he doesn't need to. You fear for Eberbach's future, you state simply. He sighs, the sound echoing slightly in the vaulted cellar. I pray daily for our preservation, but a shepherd must be realistic about wolves. If knowledge of certain traditions, including this ink that has preserved sacred texts for centuries, can be secured elsewhere, then something of value will survive even if individual houses do not. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the cellar's temperature. The abbot is preparing for possibilities too painful to openly acknowledge. The dissolution of communities like Eberbach, the dispersal of brothers, the end of traditions maintained for centuries. I will document everything, you promise. Every detail of the wine preparation, from vine selection to final acidification. Good. Work with Brother Anselm to create a complete record, vineyard to finished ink. Use the special ink itself to write these instructions. A grim smile crosses his face. There is a certain poetry in using the ink to preserve knowledge of its own creation. Over the winter months, you collaborate with Brother Anselm and Brother Johannes to create this record. The resulting document is modest in size but comprehensive, in detail, describing every aspect of the process from the specific characteristics of suitable vines to the final testing of completed ink. Brother Anselm illustrates the text with precise drawings of implements and techniques. The finished manuscript is bound in simple but durable leather, designed for practical use rather than display. When complete, 3 copies are made. One remains, at Eberbach, sealed in the abbot's private archive. Another is entrusted to a merchant bound for Madrid, where the abbot of San Lorenzo has agreed to safeguard it. The third, most surprisingly, is given into the keeping of a noble family in the region. Lutheran in sympathy, but moderate in approach, and known for their appreciation of learning regardless of its source. Knowledge worth preserving transcends our current divisions, the abbot observes when questioned about this last decision. Perhaps, generations hence, when today's conflicts are historical footnotes, this tradition may find new practitioners from unexpected quarters. Spring arrives, and with it, completion of the Bible project. The resulting volume is magnificent, nearly 700 pages of perfectly rendered text, illuminated capitals beginning each book, 20 full-page illustrations depicting key biblical scenes. Throughout, the special ink provides a framework of perfect blackness that anchors the colorful illuminations and gives the text a clarity and permanence that seems to defy time itself. The bishop himself comes to Eberbach to receive the completed work, celebrating a special mass of thanksgiving before processing with the Bible to a waiting carriage that will convey it under armed guard to the cathedral treasury. His praise is effusive. His promise of further commissions welcome news for a community still uncertain of its future. After the celebration ends and the monastery returns to its regular rhythms, you find yourself once more in the vineyard, inspecting the new growth on the special vines. Brother Johannes joins you, his hands now permanently stained with the evidence of his work in the ink room. Brother Anselm says the ink we make here is superior to any available from merchants, he comments, that even the finest workshops in Paris or Florence cannot match its quality. He would know better than most, you reply. His life has been dedicated to such matters. Brother Johannes runs his fingers gently along a vine stem, following its twisting path up the supporting structure. It seems strange that something so humble, sour wine that would be discarded otherwise, becomes the means of preserving words that will outlive us by centuries. You nod, appreciating the young monk's philosophical turn of mind. There's a lesson in that, perhaps, about finding purpose in what others might consider spent or useless. Like monasteries themselves, he asks quietly, giving voice to the concern that underlies much of abbey life these days. You consider his question carefully, looking out over the orderly rows of vines that generations of brothers have tended. Institutions may change, even disappear, you say finally. But knowledge, once captured, has its own life. What we've preserved, not just words, but ways of creating that will continue, though perhaps in forms we wouldn't recognize. He seems satisfied with this answer, and together you continue your inspection, two links in a long chain of caretakers stretching, backward into history and forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. The special vines continue their ancient cycle, budding, flowering, bearing fruit that will, through human intervention and divine grace, be transformed from sustenance for the body to nourishment for the mind and preservation for the spirit. As the sun begins its descent behind the western hills, casting long shadows across the vineyard, you offer a silent prayer of gratitude for this cycle of creation and transformation. From earth to vine to grape to wine to ink to word, and ultimately back to the Creator from whom all things proceed, and to whom all things return. In this cycle, you have found your place, your purpose, your connection to something that transcends the troubles of the present moment. The monastery bell rings, calling you both to vespers. You turn from the vineyard, but carry its lessons with you. How patient tending yields fruit in due season. How what appears complete in one form becomes the beginning of another transformation. How knowledge preserved becomes wisdom shared. And how all work, done with faithful attention, participates in the ongoing creation of the world. As twilight falls on the vineyards of Kloster Eberbach, time shifts once more, drawing you across centuries to a place where ancient skills find new purpose in a world vastly changed, yet somehow familiar. Rain taps gently against the leaded glass windows of St. Catherine's Priory as you carefully lift the ancient leather-bound volume from its protective box. Outside, November darkness has already descended across the Yorkshire Dales, though it's barely 4 in the afternoon. Inside, the soft glow of carefully positioned conservation lamps creates a warm bubble around your workstation in what was once the Priory's chapter house and now serves as its conservation laboratory. The year is 1953, and as the newly appointed manuscript conservator at this small but historically significant priory-turned-heritage site, you've spent the past 3 months slowly working your way through a collection that has survived against remarkable odds. Unlike many religious houses dissolved under Henry VIII, St. Catherine's remote location and the protection of a sympathetic local noble family allowed much of its library to remain intact, hidden away in attic spaces and forgotten chambers until their rediscovery during renovations in the 1930s. Today's subject, catalogue number MS/SC127, has particularly piqued your interest since you first encountered it in the inventory. Described simply as Practical Manual, 16th Century, Unknown Author, it had been set aside by your predecessor as too damaged for display but of potential scholarly interest. As you gently open the cover, the distinctive smell of old leather, parchment, and something sharper, more chemical, rises to greet you. The binding is indeed in poor condition, with the spine partially detached and several gatherings loosened. But it's the content that immediately captures your attention. Unlike the prayer books and theological treatises that comprise much of the collection, this manuscript appears to be a technical document of some kind. The first page bears a title, in a careful Gothic script, De Atramentum Vinaceum, the complete art of making ink from wine. Below, in slightly different handwriting, someone has added, as practiced at Eberbach Abbey, recorded for preservation of knowledge, Anno Domini 1527. Your pulse quickens. Historical ink recipes are valuable finds for conservators. Understanding how manuscripts were originally created is essential for proper preservation and restoration, but most such recipes survive only as brief notes within larger texts, or as passing references in letters and accounts. A complete treatise dedicated solely to ink making is unusual. The sound of footsteps on stone flags announces the arrival of Father Michael, the elderly priest who serves as both chaplain to the small Anglican community that maintains religious services in the Priory Church and as informal historian of the site. His stooped figure appears in the doorway, a steaming mug in each hand. "Thought you might welcome some tea," he says, placing one mug carefully away from your work area. "The damp gets into one's bones on days like this." "Thank you, Father." You straighten, wincing slightly as your back protests the hours spent bent over manuscripts. "I've found something rather interesting." He peers through wire-rimmed glasses at the open volume. "Ah, the German manual. I wondered when you'd get to that one." "You're familiar with it?" He nods, settling onto a stool nearby. "Not in detail. My Latin isn't what it once was, and parts are in German which I don't read at all. But I recognize its significance. Eberbach was an important Cistercian abbey in the Rhineland, known for both its manuscripts and its vineyards, until the secularization, in the early 19th century that is. But how did their manual end up here, in Yorkshire, you ask, carefully turning a page to reveal detailed illustrations of what appear to be oak galls and iron fragments. Father Michael sips his tea before answering. That's where the history gets interesting. Based on the Priory records, we believe it came to St. Catherine's around 1530, just before the dissolution. There was a network of correspondence between religious houses across Europe, a sort of early scholarly community. With Lutheran reforms spreading in German territories, many monasteries began sending copies of important works to houses in countries still firmly Catholic, hoping to preserve knowledge they feared might be lost. You examine the manuscript with renewed interest, noting the careful illustrations and meticulous descriptions of processes. And then the irony. The dissolution happened here just a few years later. Indeed. But St. Catherine's had powerful friends. The Lord of Ravensfield was outwardly compliant with the new religious policies, while privately sympathetic to the old ways. We believe he helped conceal certain valuable manuscripts, this among them. You turn another page carefully, revealing a detailed drawing of a vineyard with specific vines marked with crosses. The accompanying text describes the selection of grapes for ink production. Not just any grapes, but specific vines identified by age and location within the vineyard. "I had no idea ink making was so connected to wine production," you murmur, almost to yourself. "Many monastic arts were interconnected," Father Michael observes. "Nothing was wasted. Wine too sour for drinking or even cooking would find purpose in the scriptorium." A perfect example of their holistic approach to stewardship. As he speaks, you notice something curious about the ink used in the manuscript itself. Unlike many texts of the period, where ink has faded to brown or even pale yellow over the centuries, these words remain a deep, lustrous black. Even more remarkably, the ink shows none of the corrosion that often eats through parchment over time, despite its evident iron content mentioned in the text. "Father, Look at this, you say, pointing to a passage. The manuscript was written using the very ink it describes. It's a demonstration of its own content. He leans closer, adjusting his glasses. Extraordinary preservation. Nearly 5 centuries. Old, yet it could have been written decades ago based on the ink quality. You continue examining the manuscript until fading daylight reminds you of the time. As you carefully return the volume to its protective box, Father Michael watches thoughtfully. What will you do with it? He asks. Beyond the necessary conservation. Work, I mean. You consider the question. Translate it fully, for one thing. Document the recipe and methods. It's historically significant. The technical detail alone makes it valuable for understanding medieval manuscript production. He nods, but his expression suggests there's more to his question. Have you considered actually making the ink? Testing. The recipe. The suggestion catches you by surprise. Conservation typically focuses on preserving what exists rather than recreating historical techniques. Yet the idea holds immediate appeal. Your academic background includes chemistry as well. As art history, understanding the material properties of what you conserve has always been part of your approach. I'd need to source the materials, you say slowly, mind already working through possibilities. Oak galls, gum arabic, iron sulfate, those are standard ingredients I could obtain, but the wine aspect is more specialized. Father Michael's eyes twinkle. As it happens, the priory maintains a small vineyard on the south slope, established by the sisters in the 13th century and restored about 30 years ago as part of the historical garden. Mostly for show these days, but they do produce a modest amount of wine each year. And some of it turns to vinegar, I imagine. Inevitably. Sister Agnes, she manages the gardens, was just lamenting last week that several bottles from the 1951 vintage have gone too sour for communion use. You feel a growing excitement, the kind that comes when research possibilities align unexpectedly. Would the sisters object to my using it for this purpose? Object? My dear, they would be delighted. Anything that connects their work to the priory's historical function is welcomed. That's why most of them came to St. Catherine's in the first place, to maintain living traditions, not just preserve empty buildings. Over the next few days, as November winds howl across the dales and rain turns occasionally to sleet, you divide your time between standard conservation tasks and careful translation of the Eberbach manual. Your university German proves adequate for the technical passages, though you occasionally consult Father Michael on Latin theological references that accompany certain steps in the process. What emerges is not simply a technical formula, but a holistic approach to creation, one that begins in the vineyard with specific cultivation practices and extends through winemaking into ink production. The manual's unknown author describes not just ingredients and proportions, but proper states of mind for each stage of work, prayers to be recited, even the importance of working in harmony with seasonal and diurnal rhythms. Sister Agnes, a brisk woman in her 60s with earth-stained hands and practical wisdom, becomes an enthusiastic ally in your project. She provides not only the requested sour wine, but also oak galls collected from trees on the priory grounds. We've always had them, she explains one morning as she delivers a small cloth bag of the round growths to your laboratory. Never knew what to do with them, besides the occasional dye experiment. Fascinating to think the sisters were once using these for ink. The manual is quite specific about their quality, you tell her, showing her the relevant illustration. They should be harvested after falling naturally, preferably those without exit holes where the wasps have emerged. She nods, clearly filing this information away for future collection. And the wine, is it sour enough? It's been sitting in the garden shed since summer before last. You open the bottle she's brought, inhaling the sharp, vinegary aroma. Perfect. The manuscript says the more acidic, the better. Good. There's more where that came from if you need it. The 1951 vintage was abundant, but not particularly successful for drinking. With materials gathered, you begin preparing for the actual ink-making process. The director of the heritage site, Dr. Harrison, initially raises eyebrows at your request to use the conservation lab for experimental archaeology, but becomes supportive when you explain the project's connection to the priory's history and its potential value for understanding the exceptional preservation of many manuscripts in the collection. Just document everything meticulously, he advises. Could make an interesting article for the conservation journals, if nothing else. On a clear December morning, with winter sunlight streaming through the east windows of the laboratory, you begin the process described in the ancient manual. You've set up a small electric hot plate as a modern substitute for the charcoal brazier mentioned in the text, and assembled the various implements needed: copper pot, glass stirring rod, linen for straining, small wooden bowl for holding the crushed oak galls. Father Michael arrives as you're measuring the wine vinegar into the copper pot, his interest in the project having grown with each discovery you've shared from your translations. I've taken the liberty of inviting Sister Agnes to observe as well, he says. She's bringing 2 novices who work in the garden with her. I hope you don't mind. Not at all. The more witnesses to success or failure, the better, you reply, adjusting the temperature control to achieve the gentle simmer